boys and girls. I'm Miss Cindy, and this is my wonderful girl, Miss Mari. And today we're going to read you Renato and the Lion by Barbara Di Lorenzo. Renato loved his home in Florence, Italy. He loved the people there and the food there, but especially he loved the art there. It was everywhere. It was on the walls and the ceilings of the churches and in the rooms where the friars once slept. It was around every corner and in every piazza and in the museum where his father worked. Renato's father cared for artwork called sculptures. They were made of stone and some had been carved hundreds of years ago. Sometimes Renato watched his father carefully repair a sculpture when it had been damaged. Renato's favorite sculpture wasn't in a museum. It was in the Piazza della Signoria, and it was a stone lion. He said, "Buongiorno," hello, to it every day on his way to school. After school, Renato and his friends played soccer near the lion. Later, Renato walked home with his father. "Buonasera," good evening, they said to the lion. But one day, Renato's father was late, and he looked very tired. His father took Renato's hand. "I want to show you something, Renato," and the two of them walked back toward the museum. In the place where a large sculpture called David had been was now a tall domed wall. "The sculpture is still there," explained his father, "but if you can't see it, you might not know it was there." "Who might not know?" asked Renato. Renato's father pointed out the window. A group of soldiers was walking down the street. Renato knew there was a war on in most of Europe. The fighting was far away, but there were soldiers in Florence, and military planes often flew across the sky. "The artwork could be damaged if it's not protected," said Father. "But we will be here to protect it," said Renato. His father shook his head. "We are leaving," his father said. "I need to protect you." Renato swallowed hard. He had friends who had left. "Where are we going?" he asked. "Across the ocean," his father answered, "to be with your uncle and his family." "But what about the lion?" Renato said. "We need to protect him too." "We don't have time," said his father. "We must leave tomorrow." Renato looked around the museum. He looked at all the walled enclosures where the sculptures had been. Before his father could object, Renato ran towards the piazza. The lion was standing quietly in the moonlight. Renato found some bricks like the ones that used to protect the sculptures in the museum. He was putting a few near the lion's paws when he heard the soldiers enter the piazza. Quickly, Renato pulled himself up on top of the lion's back and made himself small so he couldn't be seen. The soldiers stopped nearby and talked in a language Renato didn't understand. Renato shut his eyes and breathed quietly. Before long, he had fallen asleep. It was the lion's whiskers that woke him, and the lion's muscles underneath his body as they padded down the street. Renato grasped the mane, holding himself on. The streets of Florence were quiet. They walked by the Fountain of Neptune, across the Vasari corridor. Over the Ponte Vecchio, through the Boboli Gardens, and then around the corner to his house, where he slid down the lion's back and into his father's arms. "We need to protect him," Renato said. "He protected me." But when he turned back to the lion, he was gone. "We will protect him," said his father. He put a hand on Renato's shoulder. "But first, you need to sleep." In the morning, suitcases were packed into a car, and Renato's family squeezed in beside them. "Where is Papa?" asked Renato. "We are picking him up at the piazza," answered his mother. Papa was waiting for them, but the lion had disappeared. Papa held out something in his hands. It was a brick, like the ones in the walls at the museum. And that's when Renato realized there was now a wall around his lion. He took the brick and put it with the others. "Grazie," Renato said to the lion, and to his father, and to Florence. "Thank you." A few days later, Renato climbed the gangplank to the boat that would take them across the ocean. And many days after that, they landed on a small island near a big city. There were so many new things in America that Renato almost forgot his lion. His family moved into a tiny apartment, but Renato loved exploring the big city and the museums where he could look at paintings and sculptures that reminded him of home. Years passed. Renato married and had a son, and that son had a daughter. One day, Renato walked with his granddaughter near a large public library. "Can I pet the lion?" she asked, pointing at one of the stone lions on the stairs to the library entrance. Renato nodded and smiled. "Of course," he said. "I once knew a lion," he added, and he told her the story. His granddaughter's eyes grew wide. "Is he still there?" she asked. Renato shrugged. He didn't know. He had never been back. "We have to go," she said. Renato looked back at the lion and then nodded. "Maybe it's time." The trip to Florence took less than a day, many days less than it had coming to America. So much had changed, and yet so much had not. The statues in the museum were still there, and the beautiful frescoes in the friars' rooms, and the Ponte Vecchio, and Boboli Gardens. Renato took his granddaughter's hand as they walked into the Piazza della Signoria. Children were playing soccer, just as he had as a boy. He felt a tug on his hand. His granddaughter was pointing. She was smiling, and now so was Renato. "Grazie," he said to his granddaughter, to his father, to Florence, and to the lion. "Thank you." And that is Renato the lion. Bye-bye.